Welcome to Speaking of Strong Style, where we discuss the events, news, and issues surrounding New Japan Pro Wrestling, and there was a lot of all of that this week. I am Stephen Conway. With me, as always, is Jeremy Finestone. We are contributors to the Fight Game Media Network. Jeremy, this whole G1 time has come to a close, but it ended with quite a flourish. I always start off the top saying we're going to discuss events, news, and issues, and every single one of those things is going to be covered. There's a lot to talk about. We saw a very special tournament. I think that the company stepped up in a format that had lowered people's expectations, and it turned out that those expectations did not need to be lowered. I felt the New Japan delivered a stellar tournament, and once it was over with, I was a little bit tired because I've been watching so much wrestling, but I've been watching so much great wrestling that there was a tinge of sadness that I didn't have a show to come up with and watch the next day. How did you feel after seeing Kazuchika Okada win his fourth and second consecutive G1 CLIMAX tournament?
You know, I felt silly because at the beginning of the year, I would tell people it's the 50th anniversary and it is Okada's year. It is going to be all about Okada, 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 Okada. And I felt strongly about this. And so far, so good. It was going great. And then I got blitzed by the Jay White championship win. And it threw me off of everything. And then I stayed on the focus that I said at the beginning of the year, it was going to be Okada, Okada, Okada. It would have been smooth sailing because goddamn, Okada is the man. He was a fantastic performer. Him and Ospreay were stars of the year in the match that they had. It was a fantastic G1. I saw a number of people in hindsight say, you know what, I was down on the 4 brackets, but they really delivered a fantastic product with it. Everything about it, fantastic. It's bittersweet that it's over because I'm exhausted from covering and making sure that I see everything. But I'm going to remember this one for a while, I think. I'm going to remember this one for a while.
Gedo is, of course, the New Japan booker. We mention it each time, and it's worth mentioning. He's the best in the world at it. And I know that 4 brackets was a big challenge, and he came up with a different, interesting story for each of the 4. And he really deserves a lot of credit for that. There was the monster bracket, who was going to survive all of these guys. And it turned out to be Okada. We'll get to how he got there. Mm-hmm. B bracket, or B block, was more of a line of, who
it was an underdog story.
Yes. But paired off with the ultimate front runner, which is Can the world heavyweight champion go through this thing all the way undefeated? And that came down to the very last night. Of course,
it did. And by the way, we need to give you all the credit in the world because from day one, you said Tama Tonga was going to beat Jay White, and no matter how much people push back on you, I'm pointing at me right here, you never strayed. So I want to give you that credit. You were right, and it made a great story.
Well, I had you and Chris Samsa on the show last week here, and you guys had me wavering a little bit. I stuck with it at the very end in the last second, but it was very close. It just made, and we'll get to why it made so much sense to me a little bit later. And I talked about it before. We're going to talk about it again just because it is going to have a big effect on New Japan in the fall as far as storylines go. And in the C block, we have the redemption story. This is not unusual it's more of a traditional G1 story where a star loses early and then rallies. We saw that with Tetsuya Naito, who is getting to be the elder statesman. Does he have one more run in him? It's sort of when Tanahashi had that run where he beat Kenny Omega at Wrestle Kingdom for the title. Naito's starting to get to that point where you're like, he's got one more in him. I know he's got one more in him. And this was all part of that. And it might not be over yet, actually, from some of the some of the comments. And then they teased the 7-way tie. Jeremy, I know you're disappointed we didn't get any tiebreakers in this one. That was your hope. If they do 4 blocks next year, I would expect them to do something like that because they didn't do it this year. But they teased the hell out of it until the very last show.
There is definitely room on that second to last G1 card for there to be a playoff within a playoff scenario after the intermission while the other bracket goes down. And it would probably make for a very tense half of an evening. I'd be very much interested in them pulling the thread on that at some point. And the other thing I wanted to mention was the Naito winning was something that Samson mentioned had never happened before, which was somebody going 4 wins in a row in any point in a G1 competition. And that had never happened before. 3 wins in a row hadn't happened numerous times, including Naito, but no one had ever won 4 matches in a row, regardless of winning a block. So that was a very noteworthy thing that Naito did in that one.
That's so yeah, let's go over that again. He said he won 4 matches in a row, no one had done, but Jay White went like 5-0 in this tournament. So how does that?
But oh yeah, you're right.
We'll have to go back and look at
maybe it was 4 matches in a row to win a bracket.
That could be.
But,
the 4-match rally at the end.
There was definitely like a 4-match thing that he had mentioned. And if I got that wrong, my apologies. But I do think that there was something to the winning the bracket 4 matches. No one had ever done it before. That might have been exactly what it was.
Well, there you go.
Thank you for that catch.
No, sorry, but we had 4 different stories to go with 4 different brackets. Each of them had its own twists and turns in it. And then more than that, I mean, we saw a couple of people that we knew were great continue to be great, several of them actually. We saw Jonah become a bona fide star in New Japan Pro Wrestling and perhaps one of the most over guys in the company. And that torpedo, that dive off the top, the big splash is might be the most over move in the company right now. We saw Tama Tonga, who had a strong babyface turn early in the year, really show up big. And this guy's career has been helped. David Finlay's career has been helped by getting some key wins out here. There was a lot of progress. We are in a different place at the end of this G1 than we were at the beginning. And even though the finals came down to Okada and Ospreay, who have been at or near the top for years, you didn't mind, and Jay White and Naito made up the final 4. You didn't mind that because there are fresh matches and fresh characters on the horizon coming through. I'm just encouraged after all this about what's coming up for us. And I know that I'm not trying to be a New Japan homer. I want to point out when they make mistakes. I will point out when there are problems. I'm just having a hard time finding a whole lot with them. This is such a strong month of storytelling that I'm a little giddy at the end of it.
You know, there's something to argue that there was maybe 10 or 12 guys on the New Japan roster that were legitimate, you bought into, top stars. Like, no question, these guys were the guys. Like, people knew these 12 guys, whatnot. Like, there was just a threshold. I would argue that after the G1, that roster of credibility within New Japan has more than doubled. Like, you've got all those guys that were from Strong. You got Tito, you got Isaac, you got Lawler, and you got Jonah. They're going back. Yep. They're going back to that roster, and they're going to be bigger than they were before. And you're going to have Jonah as a top heel. You're going to have Lawler probably as a top face if you read the room properly after this. Yeah. But just the G1 was set to reestablish New Japan as a force of nature in the pro wrestling world. And I can't help but think that you have to pay a little more attention to New Japan after what they did with this.
I agree with you. And let's talk about this final, because I mean, that's the billboarded moment. We're going to talk about the finals, and then we're going to talk about some announcements that were made during the finals. We're going to back up after that and look at how we got here. But the last match of the tournament, Kazuchika Okada and Will Ospreay. Now, Okada had beaten Tama Tonga in a terrific match. Ospreay defeated Naito in their first ever singles match. We'll get into details of that. And that was exciting. Did it surprise you that that was the first singles match between the two? After all the time that they'd spent in the same company, I was surprised they hadn't run into each other before in the singles, but it was fun to watch.
It felt like a surprise, but I don't know. When it happened, it just felt natural that that never happened before.
Yeah. So these two got in the ring and they had already had a difficult match the night before and things. These guys are pros. They know what they're doing. But there were a couple of notes that I was just astounded at. Okada and Ospreay then went 33 minutes and 53 seconds in the final, which I think is significant just because the entire tournament has a 30-minute time limit. And then once they get into the quote-unquote playoffs or the knockout rounds, whatever you want to call it, the finals, it is a no time limit match. They call it they refer to it as an untimed match, which isn't quite true because they keep track of the time calls and they do track how long it is, but no time limit. So as soon as they have no time limit, they go past the 30 because it's Okada and Ospreay and they can, yes. Right? And it also gets over the importance of the match. They had Cherie and Julia from Stardom with the formal bouquet ceremony before. I love that. Absolutely love that.
That was so cool.
Yeah, and it really brought something special to that match, which it didn't need it. You already knew it was a G1 final, but it added something. And of course, the integration with Stardom, and we'll see more of that in the coming months. Mm-hmm. They go on, Jeremy, to have a brilliant match. You knew that they were going to go long, but it built accordingly without going slow. They didn't work long chin lock spots just to burn time to get there, but they did what I call very patient work. They weren't rushing through things, but they were in constant motion. And you just kind of felt at about the 15-minute mark that you were about halfway through it, but it was terrific. Mm-hmm. And so I was enjoying it. And the crowd was into it. They kind of knew that it was just going to be one of those special New Japan matches where the first 20 minutes are there to set up the last 15 or 20. And you paid attention to it. They were working the subplot of Will Ospreay's neck, and Ospreay continued to strike at Okada and did a little more high flying than he does against others. Then it had the subplot within the subplot, which was he started doing moves of people who had beaten Okada in big matches before. I don't know about you. I loved seeing this and the way that Ospreay carried it off. When they got to that part of the match where Ospreay's not frustration built, they didn't play it like that. They played it like, okay, this is the next phase of the plan. It's big move time, but instead of doing my big moves, I'm going to do big moves of people that beat him. I watched that and I just loved it.
It was very special in which they incorporated the Easter eggs of the past into this final. The styles clash, especially, just like it looked perfect. And I just sat there, and there was a lot of narrative that wanted you to believe that Ospreay was going to win this match. They weighed in heavily on the Okada had 6 of 7 of the last matches, and that Ospreay wants to beat him this time on his own. And they felt, and the commentary was very much supporting that. Mm-hmm. There were a number of moments that I was just like, this is out of this world. And to think that their first match went 16 minutes years ago, and this went over double that, and it just was magnificent. It just, these two are two of the best in the world. Say what you will about them. Two other guys couldn't do this match. That's it.
He used Tanahashi's high fly flow. He used the style clash. Then he paused, aimed the gun, and did Kenny Omega's V trigger. And then they teased the one-winged angel. And of course, we've talked before that and the Blade Runner are the most protected moves in the company because he didn't hit it. And Okada managed to get out of it. But there were so many cool things in this. Rainmaker that was countered into a Spanish fly. That's another thing that only those two could have done. The other thing I noted in my notebook was at the half-hour mark, I heard the 30-minute call. These two were barely panting. The cardio on these two is incredible. I mean, they were tired and they were sweating, and that building was hot. It was in Budokan Hall, of course, which is an older building. I mean, the Beatles played there, and it was around for martial arts competitions long before that. 6,716 people in that old building, and they were not worn out at all, despite having had tough matches the night before. I mean, they're physical marvels, and there was just the hidden blade ducked and turned it into a spinning landslide, he hit the Rainmaker for the win. Just these big moves where they were just coming in and out of each other's finishers. It was just two guys at the peak of their form.
There's one small thing that I wanted to really give them credit for, is that their pace of play in this match was a number of sequences of crisp moves, absolutely perfect, like moves out on the floor, whatever. And then they use that time to sell. The selling of all of their moves was fantastic because they would sell a little bit, and then they were getting hurt, and they were selling a little bit more, and then they get in the ring, and there was a point where they both were getting like, you both need to get up right now kind of thing. And just, it was, anyone who wants to understand how to sell in a wrestling match needs to watch this and just understand that these are two pros that understand how to sell a move and then keep moving.
And in the end, of course, like I mentioned, the Rainmaker hits for I believe he kicked out of a Rainmaker. Will kicked out of a Rainmaker earlier. He did get another one in full force. Will sold it perfectly, covering pinfall. And it was the second win in a row for Okada, 4th overall in the G1. And, he comes across as somebody that's just on a higher plane than anybody else. And work-wise, this was my favorite match so far of 2022.
Yeah, I'm going to agree with you. I think people would make arguments about the Cody match in WWE where he was injured.
Match.
It was a match, but the outside forces elevated that match. This was a match that needed no outside forces. This was all built within a wrestling ring, within a wrestling story, and delivered within a wrestling ring. And for me, that will elevate itself above a match that needed outside forces to become special and transcendent. Not to take away from any of those other matches, but elementally, like fundamentally, this was among like top 3, if not number 1 match of the year.
It's going to get a lot of votes for match of the year. I'm confident it will. There were terrific matches at Wrestle Kingdom this year, which is the very beginning of the year. Of course, FTR and the Briscoes have had a couple that are going to get votes. So you can't say that it's an easy match of the year because this is a difficult year to have the match of the year. There's been some great wrestling in 2022, but this is going to be among them. And I think it's a classic. And they really turned up. And they also made some announcements that's worth mentioning here. Of course, one night of Wrestle Kingdom. So that's going to be on January 4th, Steven's birthday. They always, my first present every year is I get to watch Wrestle Kingdom. And then, but only one night. They're not doing 2 nights like they have the last couple of years. And they are bringing back New Year's Dash on the 5th. So Tokyo Dome on the 4th. And then they move approximately 300 yards away to Korakuen Hall, literally in the shadow of the Tokyo Dome at times, if you're there at the right time of day. And it is for New Year's Dash the next day. I believe it's at Korakuen. I guess I shouldn't say that officially. That might be at Oda Gymnasium. They have sometimes that ticket is such a big deal that they've moved it out of Korakuen. So I shouldn't necessarily say that right away. I'm not sure what the building is. But I think that's a smart move, Jeremy. I'll tell you why. Before the pandemic, they were getting 38,000 people in that building for Tokyo Dome shows for Wrestle Kingdom. Pandemic hits, and of course, attendance is devastated for restriction reasons. This year, they are doing better. These crowds without the cheering, I still think that that's really hurting attendance because I think it's just not as much fun to go to a show when you can't yell. And we're going to get a little of that back. We'll talk about that. But it's at this stage, I think they need to work their way back up to getting big crowds and having 2 nights of 15,000 in a Tokyo Dome and in a 45,000 seat building. 15,000 looks like a bad turnout. So why do it? I think they're smart to try to rebuild this attendance. Once they get up to about 35, 40,000, then you can start thinking about doing it 2 nights again. But I think it's a little too early. And bringing Dash back, I think that's a smart move for this time as they start to reestablish a little normalcy and rebuilding the live fan base, which is critical for New Japan. Doesn't have all the TV deals and the multi-billion-dollar streaming things. Ticket sales and merchandise are still the key to them. And some steps are being taken to bring that back. But I think going back to one night's the right move.
I think you're right. I think one night is definitely going to garner more interest among a fan base to want to watch and be invested in it rather than picking and choosing what matches from both nights or whatnot. Yeah. I think we're in agreement with that. So I'm going to ask you another question here.
Okay.
There has been a number of tea leaf reading that AEW would be somehow involved in either Wrestle Kingdom or around that time frame. Does having a New Year's Dash show make it seem to you more likely or less likely to bring in AEW talent that may not need to be on a Wrestle Kingdom card?
Well, I think you hit the nail on the head. I think they can bring in certain people for Wrestle Kingdom and have I mean, for instance, FTR could be a part of it in a tag team match. They have the IWGP tag team titles. Dash is also a place where if Wrestle Kingdom is the season finale, quote unquote, Dash is the season premiere where he starts setting up all the new stuff. This is when Suzuki's goon ran out from nowhere after being gone for a couple of years and attacked Chaos. It's where other various people have Bullet Club have had some upheavals at New Year's Dash, AJ Styles and things where they've made some transitions. It might be the time to set up things for 2023 where some AEW people come in. That could be Kenny. That's the big one that everyone's been kind of hinting at. And certainly New Japan has done nothing to dissuade people from thinking that. And so if you have a card full of New Japan matches at Wrestle Kingdom, Dash is an excellent way to have some surprise appearances and set things up for the future. It could be where they're going with it rather than have Wrestle Kingdom become a version of Forbidden Door, for instance, in Japan, right. Where it's a lot of AEW versus New Japan. I think we might see just some more surprises and things at Dash. That's kind of where my
surprises rather than expectations.
Yeah, perhaps. Yeah. And they might even just say that you're going to see some of these guys and maybe some confrontations happen. That's kind of where I'm heading with it. What do you think?
Well, the main thing for me is that I would not want New Japan to have an appearance that they need AEW to sell 2 nights of Wrestle Kingdom.
Yeah.
That is really the bottom line. And if they're going to have a number of AEW talent, there's going to be that appearance assumption. Okay. People would make that kind of intonation, and they don't need that. If you do one Wrestle Kingdom and have some AEW talent on there, and still have a majority of New Japan talent, you're doing the right thing. And then, if the demand is so out of control that next year you can do the 2 nights, like you said, do the 2 nights. But if you do 2 nights ahead, like now, and just start bringing in AEW talent and just making it like that, I could see why that would be a detriment to the growth of New Japan and why they wouldn't want to do it. This is their biggest show of the year, and they really don't need another company to help them sell it. It's a bonus to have that other company there, but they're not dependent like on AEW. And that mentality needs to be removed in some way, shape, or form.
It would be very nice if, for instance, if FTR are still in the tag team title picture, for them to come and defend or challenge for those titles again. It's okay to have, like, for instance, Bryan Danielson in a key match or something against Zack, finally get that one perhaps. 100%. I know Tony Khan has been more AEW owner. Tony Khan has been a little more in the camp of let's make sure I'm getting a cut before you get those big matches, which is probably smart. Who are we kidding, right? But so it would be nice to have one or some of those in Wrestle Kingdom, but I agree with you. I don't really want it to be AEW versus New Japan. I want New Japan to stand on its own. As we've seen from this G1, I think they've created some characters and elevated some people to the point that they don't need a whole lot of outside help. And we'll see if Cheering, which is supposed to come back in early September at Korakuen Hall on a limited basis, this is a very Japanese process of doing things with the utmost caution. There will be a special section of Korakuen Hall cordoned off from the rest of the people. And then these intrepid souls, Jeremy, will be able to use their voices in a match.
Tell us how you really feel, people.
it's going to be very interesting to see that happen. And hopefully everything goes fine and everyone's allowed to once again be vocal at Wrestle Kingdom. That would be a big step forward too. They announced one other show, Jeremy, by the way. Yes. We want to mention this. There's going to be a pay-per-view in New York City. It's going to be right downtown off 44th Street. There it is on October 28th, and that's going to be a New Japan show in the Big Apple, which should be interesting. Could possibly been hinted at. See a little bit of Stardom action on that one as well. So
did we mention the Royal Quest as well?
Yeah, Royal Quest is coming. We're
first
seeing
and 2nd of October in UK.
Yeah, up in England. Yeah. At what was that when that was Royal Hall or
Royal
York
Quest.
Hall?
I think it's it's the indoor Crystal Hall. I read it.
Crystal Palace. Crystal Palace, isn't it?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Nice. The one last thing that I will say in the AEW aspect, if at Wrestle Kingdom they bring to me Will Ospreay versus Kenny Ospreay, I don't care. Like
Kenny Omega,
give me that, and I will be. They're building to it. It seems like that would be the destination. And if you want AEW to come on over and do that match, let's do that match. Yeah. Please and thank you.
Yeah. I mean, it's the same thing that we've talked about that we didn't quite get at Forbidden Door, which is the Bryan Danielsons, the CM Punks, the Kenny Omega certainly coming back would be a monster thing. So if they wanted to bring that back, that's fine. That's kind of the Legends match at WrestleMania. It's a variety show. There should be something special at Kingdom. I don't have any problem with that. But yeah,
top of the guard champion and a non-championship spotlight match. Sure, let's always do that for me.
All right, so now that we've got all that out of the way, should we run down some of the tournament action that got us to Okada and Ospreay?
Yes, please. Let's put a bow on the G1 this year.
So we'll move through these fairly quickly, of course, because we know the destination already. But in Machida, which is metropolitan Tokyo, on the 13th, 2,212 people showed up to see some matches that they were pretty good. Not all of them were consequential toward the final standings. At this point in the tournament, several people had already been eliminated. So some of these were the playing for pride matches there. And one of those was Kenta defeating Aaron Hanare. I thought Kenta worked real hard in this match. He got a couple of late wins. And of course, they were setting him up for a key moment where he eliminated a top contender on the last night. But I thought this was a fine match. It was just under 13 minutes, and Kenta worked hard. Hanare, Hanare ended up with only 2 points in this tournament, yet he was put over in almost all of the United Empire tags. So they're not done with him. It just wasn't his time to shine this time. He's a strong worker. This was a good match with Kenta, and it got Kenta into the position he needed to be to challenge Tanahashi again.
It was really interesting. Kenta had a really good tournament after I was pretty down on him in the beginning. But on the flip side, Aaron Hanare got that big match win off of Tanahashi, and his credibility was traded off of that through the rest of the tournament. Everyone thought that he could win any match at any given time because he beat that guy at that time. And so it was masterful booking to keep Hanare as a threat, even though he ended up being a little bit toothless in the win department. You're right. It wasn't his time to shine, but they booked him in a way where he still looked stronger than he did when he started.
Jeff Cobb then defeated Toru Yano. This one was only notable because Cobb did a Yano impression to start the match. He came out dressed like Yano. He came out with his own DVD like Yano. He just kind of did his own thing. So Cobb was having a little bit of fun with that. At one point, Yano stuffed Jeff Cobb's hands into his singlet, and Jeff was straitjacketed for a little while, yet still managed to drop kick Yano with his arms in his singlet, which I thought was that was the moment, but it didn't last very long. It was only 4.5 minutes. He got his hands out of his singlet, which took him longer than you would think. But hey, we're trying to build drama here. And Tour of the Islands got a quick win for Cobb, but that one was just a little bit of entertainment there in the show.
When you're that muscular, sometimes you can't find your way out of a paper bag. I love Yano matches, but I don't want to talk about this longer than the actual match happened. It is what it is. Let's move on.
The whole Cobb thing reminded me, there was a joke that Colt Cabana played on Brian Cage, where he actually stuck a sticker, just like you would put in a sticker book, on Cage's back. And Cage is so swole, he could not reach the sticker.
I remember that.
He was stuck with it for a while. So maybe the hands and the arms stuffed in the singlet had the same effect. Shingo Takagi defeated Yujiro Takahashi. This ended Yujiro's tournament, where he ended up getting 3 wins, which was I think he certainly went the over on the over-under bets on him there, going 3-3. This was fine. Shingo overcame some interference. My favorite thing was he absolutely no-sold a chair shot and then punched right through the chair, right into Yujiro's mouth to end up setting up the victory. So this was just, I tell you what, House of Torture went through the ringer in this tournament. They were kind of made to look like chumps a bunch of times, which was interesting considering the not the push, but the shove they got at earlier this year with Jay White and Tama Tonga being kicked out. But poor Yujiro just got the chair punch right back in his face and beat.
Sure does feel like the Wish.com version of Bullet Club right now, doesn't it?
Very well put. Will Ospreay defeated Yoshihashi. This was a tremendous match. This one was the best match of the night. Ospreay worked on Yoshihashi's arm. Yoshihashi, another one who really stepped up in this one, and he's a guy that's kind of been in these tournaments before. Just a guy that finishes in a 9-match tournament, the 3-6, 4-5, that type of thing. But Yoshihashi has really worked some good ones, and this was another one. It went almost 20 minutes. Didn't seem like that, but there was a lot of back and forth, and Yoshihashi got some terrific near falls. I thought this was the best match of the night.
Somebody lit a fire under Yoshihashi's ass recently, and good on them, because Yoshihashi is showing me something that I haven't seen, and I didn't think he was capable of doing for a long time. He is where he is on the card, but that's not going to be for long. It feels like. I feel like there are brighter days ahead, and there are a lot of people coming after a spot on the roster. But you keep doing this, buddy, and you're gonna be around for a while.
The main event that night was strictly to get us where we needed to go, which was set up the idea of Jay White as the world heavyweight champion running the table. He defeated Taichi in a very good match that went long, 23 minutes and 20 seconds. A lot of choking earlier on, a lot of choking, but there was one thing that I could have done without Geto grabbing Miho Abe and dragging her around by the hair. Could have done without it. I don't think the match needed it. Don't think it added anything to it. It was meant to be a distraction spot. I'm not the biggest fan of violence against women, especially somebody that really isn't a trained wrestler. So could have done without that one. Thumbs down there. But it built back to the end. Really good near falls. Jay is not beginning to. He's been doing it for a while, but it's picked up lately. Mastering the art of being a heel that you're dying to see lose and come within an inch of losing before getting that move in there, that Blade Runner. And that was all to set up the big clash with Tama Tonga on last night.
It's just Jay White is the best heel in the world. I don't know how you can argue anyone is better at being a pure, just disliked individual in the ring. There's very few people that go like, you know what, Jay White is so cool, I want to be just like Jay White. Nobody. He is literally Johnny Lawrence from Cobra Kai. If you really want to think about it, he's just like as a teenager, not sympathetic Johnny Lawrence later on, but at the very beginning, it was like, there's nothing about you that I like, nothing at all. But he's so good at it.
Oh, yeah.
He's so good at it that like you can't help but respect him. It's the Vince Vaughn, with every pure part of my being, I hate you, but God damn it, do I respect you.
Well, there you have it. And so with that, they moved on to Nagano, which was 1,728 in attendance in Nagano. This was the only night of the tournament, Jeremy, that I didn't enjoy. I wrote down that this was WWE night. And what I meant by that is it felt like 50-50 booking. There was, of course, the story going on, and it needed to be told of how they had to get close to that, tease the whole idea of the 7-way tie. And that was important. I understand that. The other matches on the show, and there were only 4 block matches on this one, were strictly to just kind of even things out. So they were people that were eliminated from contention. They got a win, and just to kind of, so they weren't so far down in the standings. So somebody that was 2-4 got to be 3-4, and that 3-4, that doesn't work for the numbers, but you know what I mean. It was just a matter of evening things up. A lot of people finished 3-3 at the end of this night of action. The one thing that was of note, Juice Robinson attacked Will Ospreay in the aisle during the preview tags. That would play into things in their singles match a little bit later and on another night once they got to Budokan. But other than that, we had Yoshihashi beating David Finlay, and that played into the whole 7-way tie thing. So that after that match, it was still possible. It was a good match. We've talked about how Finlay is playing with house money. He has already been elevated, getting wins over Shingo, over Juice Robinson in that main event at Korakuen, and over Will Ospreay. So Finlay could have lost out, and he did, and it was fine. And he still has a U.S. title match coming with Ospreay. That's an obvious choice. So he was playing with house money. He could lose to Yoshihashi and keep this whole thing going, that we might end up with 7 guys at 3-3 at the end of the tournament. But a lot more shoulder work on poor Yoshihashi, who's, if his shoulder isn't actually hurt, it will be after people keep working it like this. But Yoshi got the small package to kind of win in a surprise and keep everything in suspense.
You're right about this show. It's not great. Wasn't a great show. It was basically a lot of, where this is going at this point, and it's mathematical, unless you are just really convincing yourself that Finlay had a shot or Taichi was still in it at this point. All of those things. It was really mathematical, honestly, the whole show. You're absolutely right. And I am glad that Finlay has a bright future ahead of him. This is one of those matches that I think about with Yoshihashi. Like, yeah, this is exactly what I'm talking about with his elevation on the card and the work that he's been doing. This was a flash pin. I remember, right? Like, Finlay was surprised on this one. That's exactly the kind of finish it should have been. Everybody's doing the job that they need to do, and the math checks out. Let's move on.
The next one was between two people that were out of it, really. Great-O-Khan defeated Taichi in about a 7-minute match. They did some sumo stuff. It was entertaining. Nothing wrong with it. Okan managed to sneak in a fisherman's buster suplex there for the victory there. So another kind of surprise pin that put everybody's final record a little bit more even, trying to even things up.
And Khan and Taichi both at 4 points, and kept them at the same level, and
And in an A-block match, Tom Lawler got a win over Jeff Cobb. This is another one where everybody was evening things up. They both finished their tournaments at 3-3. Of course, they did amateur wrestling. Cobb is Greco-Roman in the 2004 Olympics, and Lawler with his background. It was good. Lawler showed some power also right there. He moved around Cobb a little bit more than you would think he might be able to just on sight. But both men did fine. It was, again, we're doing math here, so everybody finishes 3-3. And Lawler finished his tournament where I think his personality shined through a little bit better than the work sometimes. Not all of these were easy matches for him to wrestle. Like I said, Lance Archer was a bit of a challenge. Archer's strength is a big man match, not doing in and out of submissions. Fale had a rough tournament, and Lawler's match against Fale was just kind of okay, but certainly his personality translated to the Japanese crowd. I think he helped himself with the tour. Royce Isaacs also did. So maybe not going to be remembered for classic in-ring matches, but I think when he comes back, he'll be in a position to perhaps be matched up with people that can let Lawler shine a little bit more besides his personality.
So Darren Young has no days off as his moniker, but after the G1, I gotta say, Lawler gets the no nights off moniker, because that guy never took a night off at the G1, in all honesty.
He, Isaacs, and Bad Dude Tito and Jonah worked their asses off in their preview tags.
Never took a night off.
Right. Yeah.
I just I don't mean to be glib when I say that, but there's no other way to just say it. They just busted their asses for fighting for a position to say, yeah, we belong here. And they do 100%.
And it worked. And it worked, by the way. And their post-match promos were terrific, by the way. I know not everybody watches those backstage comment clips, but I did watch them throughout the G1, and some really special stuff from Lawler out there. I think it's worth seeing, and sets him up for a babyface run. Absolutely. After being the jerk heel of NJPW Strong, there is a babyface hero in that man. And I think we're going to see it. And I'm excited about that. The last one was Kenta and Hiroshi Tanahashi. Now, these two had that no disqualification match at Wrestle Kingdom that kind of blew everybody's doors off, seeing Tanahashi work like that. And very tough match. Both guys took a real beating in it. This one was not bad. This was not bad. This was almost 24 minutes, but it was a safe 24 minutes. I had good but not great. Both guys at 3-3. Kenta had to bring Tanahashi back to the pack in order to make room for Naito's run, and of course get his win back, because Kenta did the job at Wrestle Kingdom. So here in the G1, he's the reason that Tanahashi doesn't just roll on to win the block. It was good. It was not great. Red Shoes took a bump off of a stiff as hell Hiroshi Tanahashi slap, where he didn't mean to slap Red Shoes, but Kenta ducked, and Red Shoes took it on the ear. And whew, boy, I'd better him than me.
Oh yeah. When they talk in wrestling 50-50 booking, and you don't like it when it happens back to back, but when it clicks months apart, 50-50 booking is fine. Kenta, anyone who saw that Wrestle Kingdom match would have figured, yeah, Kenta's probably winning the next one. He did, and then we're just gonna wipe the chalkboard clean and move on to the next time these two have hopefully a better match than this one, and a better match than their Wrestle Kingdom match. Something that is not a little too cold, a little too hot, maybe just right.
There you go.
One day.
So we moved on to the final night of block action, and this was a heck of a night. Now, no preview tags. It was all block matches, 8 of them. And it opened up with, they just went block by block. So we started with the D block, and then it went to, I believe it was C, and then B, and then A, and all that. So you started finding out who was making the semifinals kind of throughout the day. And the first one was Will Ospreay and Juice Robinson. Now, Juice, I'm trying to figure out what is going on with Juice in the New Japan office, just because he was not pushed at all in this tour. I feel like his time is still to come, but considering they made a pretty big deal out of his heel turn, they really didn't he did not look effective in this tournament. And this is one where I'm not saying he wrestled poorly. I'm saying the booking, the results. They did not give Juice a big push at all. He even did some jobs in tag matches that we'll get to. But this was the one we had a chance for the 7-way tie, and they killed it dead in the first match, Jeremy. This one surprised me a little bit. I'm
happy that if they're not going to tease it, they just kill it dead right away and we can move on.
Yeah, that eliminated Juice, and that put Ospreay in and eliminated Yoshihashi. It eliminated Finlay. It eliminated Yujiro, and all this just mathematically get it out of the way at the very beginning. There was some steam on this, of course, because Juice had attacked Will Ospreay in the aisle in Nagano, so Will attacked him in the aisle here in Budokan to put some steam on it there. The ref bump allowed a belt shot and then a pile driver on the floor from Juice to Will Ospreay, which set up Ospreay having neck problems for a couple of days. And he got pulp friction, but Will kicked out, so they didn't protect him they did not protect his finisher. He got into the rock slide position, but Will managed to rotate, land on his feet, and hit the hidden blade, and he took the U.S. title belt with him, Ospreay. So at the end of this, Juice was eliminated, pinned, his finisher had been kicked out of, and he didn't have the belt anymore, even though he wasn't the champion. But the storyline was that he never really lost it in the ring because he got appendicitis. This just seemed like a demotion for Juice to me. As I'm watching this, I was like, did he piss somebody off?
I would, based off of that, say there was a bridge over troubled waters this summer with Juice Robinson in the New Japan office. We're probably never going to find out what happened, and there's probably going to be better days ahead. But if this felt like a punishment served.
He's too talented to just be a schmo on the card.
No. Yeah, he's positioned as number 2 singles behind Jay White in Bullet Club right now. So obviously it's just one of those, to me, not obviously, but to me, it just feels like a flash in the pan moment of like, we got plans for you later, but this is what you're doing now.
So after that, we've had to finish up that block, and it was down to Shingo Takagi and Will Ospreay now mathematically. However, El Phantasmo defeated Shingo Takagi in the next match, setting up what looks to be at least a short-term singles feud between the two. ELP has locked on to this I'm Shingo's daddy concept to the point that he's been angling in his post-match interviews for merchandise, saying that. I don't know if that's going to hit the Tokan store anytime soon. However, a terrific match between two really, really talented guys. And if they want to work some tag matches leading to a singles match, I'm here for it. I enjoy watching these two. Phantasmo beat Shingo, which allowed Will to move on to the semifinals, and
with a new finisher too, right?
A cross-arm pile driver that looked terrific. He also declared basically, not basically, he declared he's a heavyweight now. ELP is so, which is about right. He was a oversized junior, and like Shingo was when he first got to New Japan, and now he'll be a heavy and going after Shingo. There's the King of Pro Wrestling Provisional Championship to be dealt with on that one. So I think this served the purpose of getting Will into the semis and setting Shingo up for a challenger for the King of Pro Wrestling title, which I'm on board for. I think ELP is a really talented guy, and this should be some fun stuff to watch with Shingo Takagi.
Yeah, interestingly enough, this was a spoiler match determined the bracket, because it wasn't the last match in the bracket that the winner won and went on. You know what I mean? Like the spoiler and the match before. That was the only time, I believe, on the card that happened, but they at least took the opportunity to introduce some possibilities to you that, like, it's not just a given that the second person in each bracket is going to win their match and then move on. So that was a little clever on their part.
We moved on to the C block here, where Evil defeated Hiroki Goto. This was a mathematical problem that they had to solve, and Evil got the win here with the usual Bullet Club House of Torture shenanigans and interference, which wasn't done particularly well. He just kind of grabbed the referee in a headlock, and Dick Togo ran in and hit Goto in the balls. Dick Togo and Togo and Goto, by the way, use the same 4 letters. Just got to switch the consonants. And they racked Goto, got the win, and that took Goto out, which allowed for the next match, which was Zack Saber Jr. and Tetsuya Naito. However you thought this was going to go, I bet you didn't pick this one. Nope. This one was 1:58 minutes, and it was basically a very fast scramble that Naito managed to win. And suddenly he just came up with this, and I was writing in my notes, I swear this, I was writing in my notes, you can't discount a quick finish, when I heard the 3 hit. It happened that quickly in under 2 minutes. And it was just something that was, they've done it a couple of times in this tournament where people have gotten very quick wins, and Zack ends up on the wrong end of a scramble like he did with Tanahashi, and it allowed Naito to have his redemption story after going 0-2 early in the tournament. He rallies to win the block.
Zack Saber Jr., you live by the sword, you die by the sword. You get your quick pin against Evil, and then you lose your quick pin against Naito. And so, you paid the piper for the way you did it.
And while I would have enjoyed a long Naito Zack Saber match, I'm sure I would have enjoyed it. Just the surprise of it was just kind of fun. And
I think this was to preserve Naito for his match against Ospreay, in all honesty, and it made perfect sense. It was a lot of fun. The baseball gimmick afterwards with the hot bag and the chair. I laughed audibly, and my wife was like, "What?" And I'm like, "Nothing. It's fine."
Naito had some high level trolling after this match. I think one of my favorites too is, if you notice, the losers on New Japan shows don't go back up the main aisle. They go off to this little side aisle, the sad aisle there. And the winners go back up where the big set is. And the young lions are there to kind of hold one hand up and point with the other as to which way you're supposed to go. Oh, you're over here, over here. So Naito holds his hand up and points toward the losers lounge to him, the losers aisle to him. Is like, that way, Zack, that way, which I also appreciated. Like he was a young lion standing there telling Zack which aisle to go down, like he didn't know. Between that and the ice bag, and he just and that's building to something down the road. Those two aren't done with each other by a long shot, but entertaining little surprise there. After that, we went to we're off to the B block now. Tomohiro Ishii defeated Sonata. This was a little bit more math just getting done, but I think they put this here just because they knew it would be a good match, and it really was. And there were rumors that Kevin Kelly kind of would put out there that this might be Tomohiro Ishii's last G1 tournament. I watched the backstage comments, and he never really hinted anything like that. So I'm not totally sure where that's coming from. I hope it's not true. I love the dude.
I thought that was a narrative that if he only wins one match, that it would be his last G1, because that he wasn't feeling competitive, but he won. So the tease was if he didn't perform well, he wasn't going to be in future G1, kind of like chopped off the block. And so he kind of had to win this one to prove he could still go. He won. He could still go. We'll probably see him next year.
Well, I hope so, because I mean, just the guy's work is tremendous. So we moved on then to the B block finals, which was this whole night was built toward Tama Tonga and Jay White. And it was my upset special. So as the great Arn Anderson said, not to toot my own horn, but I was so thrilled. They had some wonderful sequences back and forth with these guys. There was a stun gun that Jay White managed to block, tease the Blade Runner, but then ended up right back into the stun gun. This match built nicely. Of course, it had all the heat because Jay White kicked Tama Tonga, one of the founding members of Bullet Club, out of the group. Jado was left out in the cold. Unfortunately, Tonga Loa is injured, so he hasn't been able to be a part of this, but it has allowed Tama Tonga to really shine as a singles babyface, and the people are with him now in a way that they really weren't so much as a heel. I mean, I think Guerrillas of Destiny were never the most hated guys on the roster. I think people understood that they were good, but they didn't swing all the way to that evil end of it. And but nevertheless, as a babyface, they've really rallied behind Tama Tonga. And of course, anybody that beats Jay White is going to get over as a babyface in New Japan. Really nice finish. A fun celebration afterwards. Tama Tonga looked like he had done what his character did, which was get his accomplish both revenge and one of his biggest wins ever, all in one night. He is a block winner in the G1 tournament. He will always have that, which means something in New Japan. He was elevated. It was a great match. The celebration afterwards with Jado was terrific. Jay White was great in selling and doing the job for him. Loved it.
It was a great match. Tama Tonga repeatedly trying to hit his finisher. I think it's the gun stun. It could be the stun gun. I got a little confused right there, but
you know what? I think you're right. I think it's the gun stun.
It is the gun. Okay. No. I was like, is it the gun stun? Oh no, I don't know now.
I think I was just saying it wrong. So I believe it is the gun stun. Yes.
He would jump on that gun stun multiple times, and it happened in 2 different matches, and they sold that he could hit it at any point, almost like an RKO out of nowhere.
Yes,
essentially,
which is what it is.
Yeah, I was trying to dance around that one, but it worked really, really well because you were hoping he would hit it, but the narrative of the match and the way everything was going was like, nah, Jay White's gonna sneak this one out. He'll hit the Blade Runner, and he won't kick out of the gun stun because he won't get the gun stun. You know what I mean? It's just, there was something there that was like, he's not gonna hit the gun stun, and he's not gonna get the 1, 2, 3. And then we hit the gun stun, and he got the 1, 2, 3. You're just like, goddamn. Yeah, you did it. Yeah. You did it.
And they knew we were thinking that because they would get into that gun stun and then tease the Blade Runner so close. They knew where we were going. They knew where the crowd's mind was, and they followed it along. Terrific stuff from them. And Jay's just an excellent heel, like you mentioned, and really helped me.
Is that the best match of Tama Tonga's career?
Yeah, I think it probably is. I think it's a little bit better than the Okada match in the semis, just because of the drama behind it, just because of what it meant.
Like he
the
accomplished
Bullet Club drama. Yeah. It was such an overcoming moment, where he just overcame all this adversity that had been piled in front of him. Yeah. And of course, for a long time in those tours leading up to the G1, they just kept getting screwed over by Bullet Club and kept getting screwed by him. And so he was just had been fighting through this, and for him to just break through and then beat the world heavyweight champion, and we're going to talk about why that makes so much sense later, that really comes down to a nice piece of work by both men. And then we had to go to the A block after that, Jeremy. Jonah defeated Bad Luck Fale. This was really a vehicle for Jonah again. He had the 2 losses, so he wasn't going to be going to the semifinals, but he got the win over Bad Luck Fale, body slammed him, hit the torpedo. At this point, the torpedo is the biggest crowd pleaser in the company. You had to do it at Budokan Hall. And every single time he does it, you just hear the crowd's reactions just building. They're so anxious to see it. And then the big, oh, when he hits it. So that was in service to the fans here. He got the win over Bad Luck Fale.
I definitely wasn't banking on Bad Luck Fale having a win on the last time of tournament play. So I'm glad Jeff Cobb won this one.
We moved on to the last match of the night. This was and it turned out to be, it was for the A block, because the way the tiebreakers worked, if Archer won this match, he would have the tiebreaker over Jonah and anybody else. If he got a win over Kazuchika Okada. I thought they worked this in an interesting way, Jeremy. Like at first, the Archer comes out, stands in the middle of the ring with the hoodie like he is the most intense human being on earth, and he can get over that idea when he wants to. Kept the hoodie over his face, stood perfectly still all through introductions and through the first 30 seconds of the match where he just didn't budge. And Okada kind of walks up to it, and suddenly he explodes, grabs Okada, choke slams the living crap out of him. And then hits a blackout right off that. So Okada is in terrible shape early. And the first 5 minutes of this was basically Archer squashing Okada. And I think the idea was to put a little bit of doubt in your mind in a situation where almost everybody in the building figured Okada was going to win this.
Well, you did, and I'm not sure it worked, but they tried everything in the book. They had an upset special. They had a flash pin earlier. They had a bracket busting upset in a previous bracket. So you had all these 3 disparate factors going into your mind going into this last match, which made you think they probably weren't going to do any of those things, but you wouldn't rule it out. So Okada's the biggest star in the company. Lance Archer is not the biggest star other than maybe in Texas. And that's not any shade to Lance Archer. It's just like, that's the truth. So you had to create a match in which there was at least a semblance of possibility that you believe that Okada was going to lose this psychologically, even though when you saw the rest of the bracket of finalists into the G1, you're like, yeah, that's not really a good G1 if Okada's not in it. So Lance Archer probably looked a little bit better coming back to AEW, but he wasn't the star of this match. And it was Okada. It was the Okada show, and it was the beginning of the Okada week.
It was, and Archer did manage to hit both a drop kick and a rainmaker on Okada, which I thought was interesting, at least during all that. So Archer afterwards,
there was definitely a fiery ending. Like they went hard at the ending, and Okada really lifted the guy up and did a lot of power moves that made him look impressive. But Archer did what Archer needed to do. He didn't show me anything that was not Archer. You know what I mean? Like there wasn't an elevation of Archer's game in this G1. He was just being Lance Archer, which was perfectly serviceable within the G1. But people are talking about Jonah. People are talking about Jeff Cobb. People are talking about all these other guys, and they're not talking about Lance Archer. So was he the last guy to face Okada at the end of this? Maybe. I don't know. But it was definitely like, I would have almost had this one switched to the Tama Tonga Jay White match.
And I was a little bit surprised there, especially because it did feel like Okada was preordained to win this thing. I don't think a whole lot of people thought Archer would, but you can also see what Japan means to Archer too, just what New Japan means to him. And he gave Okada the fist bump afterwards and did a really good post-match thing, talking about how he wants to come back, hopes to come back, and but is going to go on a holy terror run in AEW. Yeah, he worked.
It's fantastic.
We moved on to the semifinals. We had some new people coming back in that we hadn't seen in a while. In some of the earlier matches, we saw people like Yo got back in there. We saw Doki. We saw a few, Kushida, of course. And what we also saw was Dangerous Techers against Team Filthy, and of course Dangerous Techers won that match. But my only note on this one, by the way, is more Zack and Lawler, please, because
I'd like
those
to see
two
more of that as well.
Together. Yeah, that was a lot of fun. So anytime you want to do that one, New Japan, we're on board for it. And then we went to the semifinal. Now the tags earlier, the night of the finals, those early matches, the prelim matches, meant a little bit more than it did on semifinal night, I think. So we'll move on to the semis, where we had Okada defeating Tama Tonga in just under 20 minutes, 19:08. I got to say, I want to mention one other thing. Jado, as the babyface coach to Tama Tonga, has been really wonderful. Just like his reactions at ringside have been great. The way he handles the post-match stuff with Tama Tonga as a babyface, really good. Just wanted to throw a shout out to Jado. I think he's added to the act. We got a
Cheers to Jado.
Rainmaker into a gun stun after a landslide. That was a hell of a near fall in this match.
Mm-hmm.
Felt a little bit like the Archer thing in that I don't think anyone really thought that Tama Tonga was going to beat Kazuchika Okada and go to the finals here. I think everybody kind of knew that Okada was going to go, but terrific match. The Cobra Flosion at the end. I'm not sure I've seen that from Okada before.
I think that was new.
Might have been new. It looked great. And look, I mean, Tama Tonga is in a wonderful spot for a babyface right now, where just being where he is elevates him. Mm-hmm. And he's going to get a shot at Jay White and the world heavyweight title. That's going to elevate him, and he doesn't need to win. He doesn't need to win. He didn't need to win this one for it to mean something to his career, which means you don't have to do it now. You can have him win later if you decide to. That'll be another step up. You don't have to do all the steps at once. And I think New Japan was good at getting him to that spot. And then, the big star here is Okada.
The best way I could put it with Tama Tonga is before the G1, I didn't see him as a guy who I would like to see carry a singles title within New Japan. And now I think he'd be a great singles champion, neverweight US champion, something along those lines where he's there is the best way to put it. He's there.
And then the last match was the first singles meeting ever between Tetsuya Naito and Will Ospreay. What a fun match this was. These are just two guys that know how to work, boy. And we mentioned they worked in the story. Juice Robinson gave Will a pile driver on the floor. Now he was able to overcome Juice, but Naito knew to work that neck, and he worked the hell out of that neck and had 100 different ways to have Will sell that. And there was a spectacular near fall after a hidden blade. He managed, Naito is the guy that always manages to slip out from those situations. These two are terrific. And I was kind of surprised they hadn't met in a singles match before any time, but there was no question that these two have chemistry. They're both some of the best at working and telling a story through their matches. And this is another example of it. I mean, there were Destinos, Stormbreakers, near falls, twists and turns, terrific stuff.
This was special in the way that the personas of both Ospreay and Naito played so well off of each other before they even laid a hand on each other that was just, I don't know. The whole thing just felt special, and it felt when Kevin Kelly told us that Naito's father was there. Yeah. And Naito grew up watching New Japan. Something in that resonated to me like, okay, this now feels like super extra special. And it was just a little thing like that just it was a fantastic match. It would be argued as one of the matches of the year, but the match the next night has overtaken it by consensus. But we cannot discount the fact that Naito was on his game for this night, bringing whatever Naito-ness that he could bring. And Ospreay, kidney infection 3 months ago.
Yeah.
What the hell? I'd be crying 3 months after a kidney infection if I had to go through this.
Will mentioned in the post-match comments that, it's incredible. And Will mentioned in the post-match comment, he's not slowing down at all. He's got to do a match for Rev Pro, right after, this weekend. After
he's on AEW next week.
Then he's going to AEW. Yeah. So he's working his way. He's going to go from Japan to England to America, all in the space of a week right there, and do all these matches. So it's he's staying busy, and he seems to be at full health. and certainly at full bloom in his talent right there. This guy is right there with Kazuchika Okada, and I think Okada is on the way to being one of the best ever, to be honest. I think he's going to end up in the discussion.
They're going to have a rivalry for the ages. Ospreay and Okada, rival for the ages. Stephen Conway, I got a question for you.
What's that?
Does this mean we get to put a bow on the G1 this year?
Do we get to put a bow on G1 this year?
I think
we can do that.
Talked about everything about the G1 this year?
Yeah, I think we did.
About the G1? Well done, sir. I tip my hat at you. I tip my cap. You have done an excellent job recapping this stuff. So now that we've recapped the recent past, do you have anything in terms of the history lesson for us?
Well, yeah, and we're still talking about G1, and of course the history of it. Let me bring that up here. So we had mentioned the build-up all the way to the idea of the G1 as a concept. So they started off with their small tournaments in the 70s that built into bigger tournaments. The MSG series, when they were working heavily with the WWF, it became one of the premier tournaments in the wrestling world, and a big tour for New Japan. They moved on to the International Wrestling Grand Prix, which is where the whole concept of IWGP came from. And that was a monster event that included people like Andre the Giant and Hulk Hogan in his prime. And it just built and built. So the IWGP gave way to the G1 CLIMAX. And so G1 CLIMAX was the next evolution of this annual tournament. They still haven't locked in the formula, though. And we're going to see that throughout the 1990s, they continued to tinker. We're kind of used to the G1 being round-robin blocks of either 2, sometimes 4, leading to a final. But it wasn't always like that, but sometimes it was. They were really just trying to find a rhythm with it. First G1 was in 1991. And the first was a round robin with 2 4-man blocks. And there was a changing of the guard with the original G1 tournament. We've gone from names like Antonio Inoki, who won like most of the previous tournaments. Being the owner has its perks, but he was also the biggest star. There's no arguing he was the biggest star in the company as well. But names like Fujiwara, they named the armbar after him. Seiji Sakaguchi, legend in New Japan. Andre the Giant, Riki Choshu, like all-time legends and things. Well, those guys were starting to get a little long in the tooth. You start to see some names of people who would carry New Japan through this boom period of the 90s, and it was an absolute boom period for them. Is that thunder on your end? It's here? Oh, my goodness. Yeah, I'm hearing thunder out here. I'm in Texas, and it's been such a hot, dry summer.
I heard it. I was like...
the idea of rain just seems like this foreign concept that happens to other people. So hopefully,
stay dry, my friend.
Yeah, I might go play in it. Are you kidding me? My yard is crispy. Okay. But the first G1 was in 1991, and they had actually skipped a year. They tried this World Cup tournament in 1989 that didn't work at all. 1990, they didn't bother. 1991, we got the G1 CLIMAX. And here are the names that were on top. I mentioned it. No more Inoki and Sakaguchi and Fujinami. Now we have Kaiji Muto, who was back in New Japan after his run as the Great Muta in WCW. And he was on top of that one. Fujinami was still a factor, but Scott Norton and Big Van Vader. Now, there's 2 big foreign guys right there in the terms of Jonah and Jeff Cobb of their day. And then Block B, Masahiro Chono, Shinya Hashimoto, Bam Bam Bigelow, and Riki Choshu. Actually, Riki Choshu went with 0 points through the tournament there. But there's the changing of the guard. Now we're seeing that generation. The triplets sort of Muto, Chono, and Hashimoto would be the biggest stars of the company for the entire 1990s, and they really ascended as in 1991 as part, and G1 was a big part of it. Chono defeated Shinya Hashimoto, and then Kaiji Muto defeated, and then he defeated Kaiji Muto in the finals, a match that went 29-31. Chono and Hashimoto had tied in block format. This was the rise of Chono, who is now known as Mr. August. That's his nickname in New Japan because he won the first 2 G1 tournaments and 3 of the first 4. And so he would be called Mr. August. And he'd go on to win 5 over time. Inoki actually won 10 tournaments when he booked himself to win a lot of the early ones. But Chono in the G1 era was kind of the standard bearer. He still so associated with the G1, they bring him back for the finals every year. He was there at the broadcast commentary position with the sunglasses. Still one of the coolest human beings on earth, that one. And there he was. So this was the rise of Chono. Like I said, he won the first 2 and 3 of the first 4. Now, in 1992 and 1993, they went with a 16-man elimination tournament. So, and they had come full circle. They were no longer working with WWF at all, of course. WWF was long past the point of working with anybody else, really, by at that point. Although they were about to do a little bit with Smoky Mountain Wrestling there in the mid-90s. But at this stage, they weren't. Here's a couple of names of people that I bet you didn't know had been in G1 tournaments. How about Arn Anderson and Steve Austin? Stunning Steve Austin participating.
I knew Steve Austin was in one, but I wasn't. Mm-hmm. I didn't know about Arn Anderson. So
yeah. So Stunning Steve Austin defeated Arn Anderson in the first round of that single elimination tournament there in 1992. Also, Barry Windham. Let's see who else was in this one here. Bam Bam Bigelow, Scott Norton, Kensuke Sasaki, another star. Jim Neidhart. Not a name you would associate with it.
No.
Terry Taylor, the Barbarian. He's been in them before right there. And the key in this one is Rick Rude, who was one of the best heels of that generation, really, of the late 80s, early 90s. This is a very fateful tournament for Rick Rude. So he was, of course, a big star in WWF, then in WCW. 1992, he goes over to the G1 tournament, single elimination, as I mentioned. Steve Austin advanced to the next round before he lost to Kaiji Muto. Rick Rude defeated the Super Strong Machine, and then he beat Shinya Hashimoto, who was a legend. He gets past Kensuke Sasaki in the semifinals, and Rick Rude goes all the way to the finals against Masahiro Chono. Unfortunately for him, and here's why I say this is when he injured his back terribly in that match with Chono.
Oh.
So he took a bad bump on a platform. The ring and the ringside area was on a raised platform in the big building. So they put that up a little bit. It was only like a foot, and they still do it at the Tokyo Dome. You'll notice that there's a little bit of a step up onto the ringside area. So the area that the ring is on, the area that the mats outside the ring is on, all the way to the barricades, raised up a little bit so that the floor seats can see it a little better. Rude took a bad bump on that. His back was never the same. And his in-ring career, certainly as a top wrestler, ended that day. And that was about the end of Rick Rude, who was one of the very best heels in the business. And unfortunately, his back would never quite be right again. And he managed to gut his way through that match with Chono. But that was the end of Rick Rude for the most part. That when he saw him, he would continue to work later on for ECW, WCW, and WWF, but not in the in-ring capacity. He could still talk. That wasn't affected. And he was still a terrific character. But unfortunately, one of the better heel careers died that day in the G1 tournament. So
I hope it's one of those things you hear about injuries like that. And you think like it's so unfortunate because you feel like nowadays they would have the treatment that he wouldn't have had to suffer quite so much. In hindsight, one would hope, but
yeah. So that was another name that was in that tournament, by the way, is Tony Halema, had been a top heel in WWF for a short time as Ludwig Borga, if you remember that name, all the way back to So he was in New Japan at that point. In 1993, they continued with the 16-man elimination, like I mentioned. Of course, no Rick Rude, but you did see mostly New Japan guys. There were not the WCW. It was not WCW presence in this one. And in that one, it was Tatsumi Fujinami interrupted Chono's run there by beating Hiroshi Hase. Hiroshi Hase is somebody I mentioned before who rose pretty high in Shinzo Abe's government. He was in the Diet there, which is akin to the Japanese Senate. Doesn't really line up exactly, and then he was in the cabinet of Abe. Abe, of course, the politician who was recently assassinated only a few weeks ago in Japan. So that was Hiroshi Hase, who was also booking a lot of New Japan at the time as well. So moving on from there, we moved to 1994. They did have the current format. By God, it's Block A and Block B, and the two highest scorers kind of go to the finals. It sounds familiar, right? So in this one, Masahiro Chono defeated Kensuke Sasaki, who was doing a Road Warrior gimmick at the time, actually. He was called Power Warrior, and he had the paint, and he had the spiked shoulder pads, and he teamed with Hawk when Hawk would come over. Animal, at this point, had cashed in his Lloyds of London policy during this era and was not wrestling. So Hawk took on Kensuke Sasaki as Power Warrior, and they wrestled basically as the Road Warrior gimmick in Japan there. So, but that was Chono's third win there. So, tinkering with the format again, but you're seeing a lot of the same names. 1995, they had semifinals to go with finals, but only blocks of 4. It was Kaiji Muto with 4 points, Masahiro Chono with 3, Ric Flair participated in that tournament, finished with 3 points, Shiro Koshinaka with 2, and on the other side of the ledger, it was Shinya Hashimoto, Scott Norton, Hiroshi Tenzan, and Kensuke Sasaki. So there you're starting to see the beginning of Tenzan in there. And Flair actually had a 30-minute draw with Chono, beat Koshinaka, and lost to Muto. That was his G1 experience there. So that was when Ric Flair was in the G1. Muto ended up winning it in the end over Hashimoto. And I'm just on a personal note, my favorite tournament was 1996. If you ever get a chance to go back and see some of that stuff on either YouTube or New Japan World, fantastic tournament. Riki Choshu was booking the company at that time, and he booked, and this is going to sound selfish, but the way he did it, it worked. He booked himself as the complete underdog to make a shock run and win the thing. And that sounds so self-serving, and I guess it kind of was, but in the time it worked because Chono was still very effective, but it was clear that Chono and Muto and Hashimoto had passed him by. Shinya Hashimoto was the world champion the IWGP champion at that time, had a knee injury, and they booked him to gut through his matches but lose. And it was worked so great, Jeremy, that he was over more after the tournament, losing all of his matches than he was going into it. So he went in and just showed so much guts and so much courage. And his knee really was hurt. And they managed to work it, but he would lose his matches so valiantly that the crowd was just going insane for the dude. And he was much more
1996.
Yeah. And it was really great. And Choshu made this surprise run to the end, and there were great matches all around. And for whatever reason, in 1996, the crowds were just white hot. I mean, these people were jumping up and down, screaming. It was a really great era in Japanese wrestling as a whole. All Japan was in the middle of that Kobashi, Misawa, Kawada run, and there was just great stuff all around the country. So we go through the 90s, and you see the same names over and over again. It's Chono, it's Hashimoto, it's Muto, it's that generation of stars that got New Japan to the point where they were running quarterly shows at the Tokyo Dome and selling them out. It was a real booming period for them. And it was every 4 months or so they were doing Tokyo Dome shows. And they did a single elimination tourney in 97 and 98. It was Kensuke Sasaki and Shinya Hashimoto winning. In 1999, Manabu Nakanishi snuck in there and beat Muto in the finals. And this takes us into the 2000s. The next time we'll go into the 2000s because we still have a decade to go before another new guard, like the triplets of Chono, Hashimoto, and Muto carried them through the 90s. It would be the aughts were a bit of a lost decade for New Japan. Business was bad. There were a couple of times you didn't think the company was going to survive. We're going to have to work our way through that before we start seeing some of the names that has made New Japan special to us. And as we go through that decade, we'll see the struggles. We'll also see the very beginnings, names of people that, the Tanahashis in there, and some of the other ones that ended up making New Japan into another boom period. So we will cover that one next time.
I'm looking forward to it, my man. I'm looking forward to it.
Anything about New Japan Strong that we should know?
There was a best of show 2 weeks ago, and I was not able to catch it this week, unfortunately. So I don't know. But we will do a double catch up next week, along with a G1 award wrap up, just kind of going through some of the awards that we, after marathoning dozens of hours of wrestling, the winners, the losers, the most charismatic, and the matches that you should make time for. We'll go over
And
that.
let's also pardon me. Let's also make sure that we cover, and we will, how things are going moving forward. What's going to happen with the Neverweight title now that the other championships are going to be a factor again? What's going on with King of Pro Wrestling, the U.S. title, the tag team titles? We'll know more about that as well.
A general state of the union of New Japan will be coming soon from our show, because it is time to look at anything other than singles matches in a bracket. It is an exciting time. The landscape is wide open with some ability to figure things out, but there's a lot to like, and a lot of they have a lot of momentum right now, New Japan, and we're going to carry it along with us. We'll see you next week.
We'll see you next week. We'll do it all again. For Jeremy Feinstone, I'm Stephen Conway. Thanks for watching. Speaking of strong style, and we will catch you very soon again. Thanks for watching.